So where does the name come from? Basically, cold pressed paper is pressed with cold rollers or plates, and hot pressed paper passes through heated rollers or plates. And I want to start explaining with cold pressed paper right here. As you can see, it says easy to correct, and we will see if that's true. This is Van Gogh's cold pressed paper. And I want you to take a closer look to see the tooth of the paper. You can see how textured it is. It has a bumpy surface and all the pigments go into those grooves. And here is my hot pressed paper. This is my favorite, Archie's hot pressed. And you can see that it has 100% cotton label here, which is great because we want our papers to be acid free, and if possible we want them 100% cotton because we get the best results with those. And let's have a closer look. You will see that it is not textured at all. It's pretty smooth. So how does the paint look on these papers? You can see that I have a very rough cold pressed paper here, and you can see those blue pigments are getting into the grooves and making this very unique characteristic look of cold pressed paper. A lot of watercolor artists like this look, and this is a medium grained one. It's not very textured, but it's still textured. You can see it from the tree right here. And this is one of my paintings I did on a cold pressed paper, and you can see all these textures showing through the green paint, and I like how it looks. It looks dreamy almost, and I think this is why a lot of watercolor artists choose this paper. It is also easier to get mixtures of colors or have those different shades of green mix in each other with cold pressed paper. This is a medium grained one, and one of the reasons I like this is look at those walls and the roof. You can see that brick effect. I didn't do anything to do those brick effects. It's the paper itself, because the pigments went into those tooth of the paper and it just gave that perfect effect. And if you're using ink, I highly recommend you to use either smooth or medium tooth watercolor paper. This is also cold press. You can see all these textures showing on my lion's face. Usually if I do realism, I prefer hot press, but when I want that texture to show, I also use cold press. And here you can see that texture is adding an extra originality to this painting. As we move forward, I will show you how hot pressed watercolor paper look in a second. This is also cold press. It's actually medium textured, and you can see in this Milky Way the texture of the paper showing as well, especially where the green part is on the left. It's a beautiful, dreamy look. Okay, now it's time to show you how my hot press works. So this is a hot pressed paper, watercolor paper, and you can see that there is no texture whatsoever showing through the paint. And it is realistic. As I said, when I do realism with watercolor, I prefer to do hot press most of the time because it looks like a photo. This is also one of the works that I did on a hot pressed paper. When you look closely, you will see that there is no texture. It's pretty smooth on that pumpkin. And now I'm going to put my lion and my pumpkin side by side so you can see actually how textured my lion was and how smooth the pumpkin is. So you can see this is also a landscape that I did 2 years ago, and you can see that it's also hot pressed because there is no texture showing. But again, you can choose cold press and it can still look great. Now, I did the same painting with cold press and hot press so that you can see much better what the differences are. So this is the cold press with the blue background. I added blue background so you can tell the difference which paper is which. And this is the hot press one. And when I put them side by side, it's almost like the one on the left is low resolution picture and the right one is the high resolution picture. That's how I feel. One thing I realized, like, there are sharp edges on the hot press one, but I don't see those sharp edges around my flower on the left one, cold press one. because I think since the paper is so absorbent with the cold press, it absorbs as much as it can. So I feel like paint is more out of control and the colors blend in each other much easily on the cold press. Let's look at their drying time, because if you're working especially wet in wet method, you need time, right? So I wetted all my papers right here, and I'm gonna wait till they dry and see which one dries first. So the bottom one is the cold pressed one, and the upper right one is like a medium tube cold pressed paper. It's still textured, but it acts like a hot pressed one, and I'm gonna explain in a second. In 3 minutes, my cold pressed one was dry already. So this tells me that it is real that cold press ones are more absorbent, so they dry more quickly. So you have to act more quickly on cold pressed paper. If you are doing a lot of washes, like maybe many layers with a lot of water, then maybe hot pressed one is better for you, because cold pressed doesn't perform the best with many washes. When it comes to lifting up the paint while it's still wet, I think they perform exactly the same. When I lift up the paint, the exact same amount of paint left on the papers. I can actually even say the cold press worked much better with the wet paint when I lift them up. But how about when they dry, or when they're about to dry, can I still make corrections? And we will see. This is why I did those blue dots. So I'm going to try to remove the half of those dots now. Again, I'm going to start with my cold pressed paper. They're almost dry now. As you can see, it's not lifting up the whole paint anymore. This was an unsuccessful attempt. And this is my medium grained one. And look, it's falling apart. This is not because it's medium grain, it's because of the quality of the paper, by the way. Probably it's cellulose, not 100% cotton. And this is my hot pressed 100% cotton paper. And look, I can easily still lift up the paint from my hot pressed. So this is a big plus, because if you're making corrections, if you're changing your mind so many times, then hot press is for you. Look how damaged it is. You're not gonna see this kind of damage in hot pressed paper for a very long time. After so many layers, maybe. Now I want to show you how they layer on top of each other. I didn't change anything. It's just what I'm working on right now is the medium grain one, and I'm adding one darker shade of orange and a lighter shade of it, just trying to show different shades of the same color. This is the hot pressed one, and you can see how borders are very prominent and they are very separate. With the medium one, you can see that a little bit of blending of the colors, but you can still see the layers. When it comes to cold press paper, you see that they blended much better, and you don't see those layering as strong as you did in the hot press one. Let's compare them all together side by side. And you can see the difference between hot press and cold press is very obvious, because if I had to pick one for details, yes, I would pick the hot press. But if I want more smooth results where colors blend in each other smoothly, very nicely, then I would probably choose cold press then. But also you can see the texture in the cold press. If you are a texture person, go for it. And this is the result of the medium grained one. And also I want you to look at those green grasses that I tried to do with my brush. Look, hot press one had very tiny details of those green grasses, but the one that I painted in the cold press one clumped into one, so it looks like a one thick brush stroke, but it's not actually. So my paint dissolved more. I had less control over the details. One more thing that I want to add, if you hadn't noticed yet, with hot press paper, you will have more vivid colors, whereas it's going to be slightly flat when you use the cold press watercolor paper. As you saw in this video, while fixing our watercolor mistakes, paper plays a big role. But also, there are some other techniques that you need to know to fix all the watercolor mistakes. If you're interested, the video is right on the right side.